Welcome to everyone. Welcome to our Minds and Money presentation. Obviously, this is something that we undertake, as usual, on the periphery of Minds and Money itself. We prefer to sort of skulk in the background and use the conference facilities at the Hilton Hotel, which we have done for very many years, successfully so. It gives us a good opportunity to meet with investors and other interested parties in a more private, more relaxed setting. It's just something that we preferred to do rather than participate in the main conference. But I understand the conference is going well, a lot busier than in the last couple of years. So I think hopefully this time next year I will be able to join you all in person. So welcome again to the Ariana Resources presentation. This presentation will probably take a little over half an hour, and I'll leave plenty of time for questions afterwards. But I don't mind being interrupted during the presentation. I think it affords a more interactive experience. So if you've got a pressing point that you want to make, I'm happy to address that straight away. So just as a recap, Ariana has been listed on the AIM market of the London Stock Exchange since 2005. We have been largely focused in Turkey, in exploration originally, but moved our primary project, Kızıltepe, through a joint venture partnership with a Turkish construction firm into the construction stage in early 2017. We've been producing successfully there ever since. I'll talk about that operation and others in more detail. But as a company, we've evolved, particularly in recent years, quite dramatically as a result of our successful entry into production, but also as a result of our expansion into some other countries in the vicinity. And again, I'll address all of these points in more detail. The usual disclaimers, take that all as read. So just to start with a snapshot, an overview of the company, where we stand today. We have multiple advanced projects, primarily in Turkey. So Kızıltepe, I've already mentioned, our producing asset. The Tavşan mine, which is currently in construction, and the Solunbaş project, which is at the exploration and development stage. All of those assets are held in partnership with Özaltın Holding and Prosea Construction in Turkey, and that forms part of what is essentially a profit share arrangement on those ultimately producing assets. We also have an involvement in Venus Minerals that holds the Magellan project in Cyprus. We hold 50% of Venus Minerals. We've obviously been able to pull our resources together as a team over very many years. So we've got a very successful team, both operationally on site in Turkey, but also our own exploration team that continues to do great things across the region, backed up by, of course, the board that has demonstrated a proven track record in bringing projects all the way through from grassroots stage and into ultimately production. As a result of this, we've been able to demonstrate significant financial performance across the business. We've been a profitable business for the best part of 6-7 years now, and as a result of the deal that we were able to conclude a couple of years ago in Turkey relating to our primary operations, we were able to ultimately return via a special dividend £7.74 million to shareholders since September of 2021. So counting the dividends and plus the marked improvement in share price since 2016, that date taken being the prior year before production was commenced on Kızıltepe, we've seen a marked return on investments coupled to coupled to the dividend payment as well. We're in a very strong financial position, sitting on a significant pile of cash, with importantly no debt. And with this, we're obviously able to continue to fund exploration in Turkey and in the wider region. In Turkey itself, over the course of financial year 21 and 22, we've completed over 36,000 meters of diamond drilling across our advanced projects. This is a huge, a marked step change in the pace of exploration that's been undertaken in Turkey over recent years. So that represents 40% of all drilling ever completed by the company since our very first program in 2006. So that just highlights the amount of work that's been undertaken on the ground by ourselves and our partners in Turkey across those advanced projects. We've also, particularly over recent years, we've commenced a diversification of risk, both across commodities and jurisdiction. So we're now involved, I've mentioned Cyprus already, but Kosovo and Eastern Europe more generally. So there is very much a spread of interests across the Eastern European part of the Tethyan metallogenic belt. But we've also spread our risk across various stages of projects, and indeed we now have a number of active investments in discovery stage opportunities elsewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. I won't dwell too much further on that slide. I'd prefer to just jump ahead here. We'll cover some of those other points shortly in any case. Just a recap of the board. Michael de Villiers, our chairman. I'm sure you've been speaking to him in recent hours, if not yesterday, and Chris Sangster also around. I haven't actually been able to see, is William in the room?
No, he's not.
He's not. Okay, so William, unable to join us this time, but William, he is effectively our Chief Financial Officer, non-executive director, but we've been together as a board for very many years now. A quick overview of share price performance. Again, important to just point out that this graph is taken to the year 2016, and it's important that we frame it in that way, because that marks the change in the dimension of the company as we transform from exploration stage into formal production through what was a joint venture in Turkey at the Kızıltepe operation. So since 2016, we've seen quite a marked change in share price. Understandably so, particularly as the joint venture company paid off a significant amount of debt, and I'll address that again later in the presentation. Since later 2020, the markets were starting to cool off from that time. So we have, like the rest of the market, we've seen a sort of a slowdown there. But in terms of the way that the company has performed over that time, I think some of the greatest work that we've ever done, and the number of hurdles we've been jumping through in the last couple of years has been quite tremendous. And just reflecting back on the amount of drilling that we've undertaken in the last 2 years alone gives an indication of that. Other than that, I think it's just worth pointing out on this slide that Newmont Mining became a significant investor in the company in the earlier part of this year. That investment of $2.5 million was in association with a partnership, a strategic partnership with Western Tethyan Resources in Eastern Europe. and I'll talk about that particular arrangement in further detail. I should also point out there that Procea Construction, our original and ongoing JV partner, is also a fairly significant shareholder in the business. So it's important, I think, also to point out, and again, reflecting on that share price performance graph shown in the prior slide, why that is. And a large part of that is obviously to do with the gold and indeed silver production coming out of our Kızıltepe operation. So the chart on the left-hand side shows the gold and silver revenue, gold component in gold and the silver in grey. And you can see from this that there is a strong performance of that operation. In fact, it's been guidance beating every single year. This year, in fact, we're on track to certainly meet and possibly even exceed guidance of 25,000 ounces of gold. But obviously with the improvement that we've seen in the gold price in recent times, and certainly the significantly higher gold price that we saw in the earlier part of this year, we're on track for record revenue this year, even though our gold output is somewhat less than in perhaps 2019 and 2020. So we are expecting the total revenue figure for the Kızıltepe operation to reach about $230 million by the end of this year. Also coupled to that, and putting things into a broader and indeed longer term context, if you look at the resource growth of the company since our very first resource estimate, which followed our first drilling program in 2006, the first resource on Kızıltepe was announced in 2007. We continued to grow that in 2009, and certainly by then we'd added the initial resource at Tavşan, which we've now updated as of yesterday, and I'll address that further later on. And then through 2013-17, we were starting to see further increases in the growth of the Kızıltepe resource in particular. And by 2017, well, we'd already made the discovery, but we had announced a significant resource for the Salınbaş deposit in 2015, and then it's continued to grow. And this is something that we feel very strongly that we can continue to maintain in the years ahead. We see lots of opportunity in the country, in Turkey specifically, but also elsewhere, as previously noted. So we can continue to drive this resource growth profile forward. And another way of looking at the company's growth over time is to look at the value that we ascribe to the diversification of the business. And this diversification has become particularly marked in the last few years, but it was already a trend that was beginning back in 2014 when we added Australia to the portfolio through the initial development of Asgard Metals, which originally had a lithium portfolio. So that kicked off in 2014, and then we continued to grow various facets of the business. And as I said, in the last few years, that pace of progress has increased quite dramatically as we've added further segments to a growing pie, so to speak. So it's important to note that Turkey itself continues to represent a significant and ongoing part of our business, and strategically very important to us. We've established a formal head office in Ankara. We've continued to expand our team and footprint in Turkey, and indeed our operational capabilities and reach. So it's absolutely fundamental to the way that we continue our business going forward. But while the Turkish component of that pie has not shrunk, all we've been doing is adding further segments to it through the addition of Cyprus, Kosovo, and of course the increasing growth of some of those components over time. Another point that I wanted to make was, again, it's a point of difference, and again, it speaks to the performance of the company, particularly in the last few years. We've been able to demonstrate through various operational metrics quite remarkable and indeed industry-leading levels. So if you look at the carbon outputs of our operations, I think is an important metric to understand in our current environment. We are currently operating at a marked lower CO2 footprint than other operations internationally. In a financial sense, our operational cash costs are still industry leading. So on average, over the life of the mine, we've been producing gold at less than $650 per ounce, compared with an industry average of $1,000 per ounce. But the metric that we're perhaps most proud of, and I think is the key metric by which any exploration company needs to measure itself, is the discovery cost of the ounces that it's putting on the book in the case of gold. And this is the real cost of the discovery to shareholders fundamentally. So that's currently running at about $11 per ounce of gold discovered, compared to a global industry average of more like $62 per ounce. So it's these and indeed some other metrics by which we've chosen to measure the performance of our business, and by which we can relate back to the way that the market measures our performance. So looking at the company as a project pyramid, and indeed pipeline of opportunities, at the apex we have the operational cash flow derived from Zenit mining operations. So this is the entity in which we hold a 23.5% stake. And as I've mentioned, our partners are Procer Construction and Zoltan Holding. One rung beneath that are our regional exploration partnerships, Venus Minerals in Cyprus and Western Tethyan Resources in Kosovo. And a further rung beneath that, the Asgard Metals Fund in Australia. And in a sense, the project generation division sitting beneath that, where some of the sort of key longer term ideas for the growth of the business are ultimately derived. Looking at the projects in this form as a investment pyramid, obviously the least risky assets are right at the top and the highest value assets are at the top, but it's important to keep feeding the bottom, to continue to grow that pyramid up and indeed out. So that's something that we're undertaking continuously. So that is a sort of more sort of conceptual high-level overview of the business. This is how the business is now spread geographically, with a general spread of interests across the Eastern Hemisphere. The main focus region, again, worth emphasizing that it's around that Turkish hub. And I should actually at this stage just make sure that I've got my laser pointer ready, because I need to point out a few things. So our major operational hub here in Ankara, and Ankara is within very easy reach of our operations in Western Turkey and indeed elsewhere across the country, Ankara being quite a central location within the country, and very easy to get in and out of Ankara on international flights as required. So we've generally kept our interests in this region, but we are starting to spread our wings through our investments, which are minority holdings at the present time, run through Asgard Metals in Perth. We have interests in Western Australia, Northern Territory, Laos, and in Kazakhstan through the investments made there. Looking at the Eastern European region in a little bit more detail, and speaking a little bit towards the geology, one of the reasons why this area is highly prospective is that it represents the amalgamation of several arcs, as the African plate ultimately collided with the Eurasian plate from the Cretaceous period onwards. And these shaded areas through this simplified map represent some of the more prospective regions for the types of mineral deposits that we're currently searching for. So these are ophiolitic rocks, and a case in point being the very globally renowned Cyprus ophiolite seen here, and in the larger scale map over here. The VMS, volcanogenic massive sulfide copper gold systems are very much associated with these ophiolitic rocks. And as you can see through Turkey, there are large areas comprising such rocks that are of the same age as the Cyprus ophiolite and equally prospective. The other rocks of importance to us are the volcanic rocks. The volcanic rocks are generally younger than the Cretaceous period. So Cretaceous being the period of the dinosaurs, the last period of the dinosaurs. So that was all over at the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago. So a lot of these volcanic rocks formed a lot younger than that. And the mineral deposits that we're primarily operating on, such as Kızıltepe and indeed Tavşan, are associated with Miocene volcanism and the epithermal or hydrothermal systems that were established as a result of that. I could say the same sorts of things for the Salınbaş Ardile area, and likewise through the rest of Eastern Europe there. Another way to look at our projects is by comparing the advanced projects, at least, in terms of their aerial footprint and by their volume. Now, interestingly, it's just worth pointing out that Kızıltepe, being the operational mine, it actually sits on the smallest areas, smallest volume of all of the assets that we're currently focused on. It's also, this is a depleted resource now, but it's also now sitting on one of the smallest resources and indeed reserves in the portfolio. And there are other projects that are coming up through that pipeline that I was talking about earlier. Tavşan, these are the recent numbers from Tavşan, now updated to include the most recent JORC resource estimate of 307,000 ounces. These symbols effectively show the comparative gold and indeed copper content of these different ore bodies. So the larger the circle, the larger the amount of gold or copper associated with those deposits. So as we continue towards the right, the Tavşan deposit is the next largest by aerial footprint and volume. So that's understandable that will be the next most important deposit within the stable. But then we have Salınbaş, again, another stepwise change, and the Ardile porphyry, which just sits immediately adjacent to Salınbaş. So that area shown here is this area here. So the two could actually be considered one and the same in a way. They are different systems, but they evolved at the same time. Magellan, we've shown the Magellan footprint split between various sectors, so that this relating to our interests in Venus minerals in Cyprus, and this being largely a copper system with associated gold. So moving on to Kızıltepe, start rattling through this fairly quickly. A lot of this information we've already covered. The important thing I wanted to point out here is that the venture has funded all development requirements since the outset. And indeed, Procer Construction themselves had kicked in $8 million of their own funding. This figure of $49.6 million primarily represents bank debt. That's all been paid off, apart from this tiny little bit that is due to be paid off by the middle of next year. Important development was the increase in output from about 200,000 tons per annum, which was steady state under the original design. We've now increased that to 400,000 tons per annum through the expanded plant design. And we currently have about 50,000 ounces in current reserves to play with, but we do have an ongoing drilling program, and we're expecting during the course of next year to continue to expand the resource and indeed build out the life of mine. Tavşan, which is located about 75 kilometers to the northeast of Kızıltepe, so within relatively easy operational reach for the team based in Sındırgı. Construction is well underway, has been since July. This is a recent aerial shot of part of the construction area. The work underway at the moment is largely on the heap leach pads and associated infrastructure that sits off in this direction and off in this direction. But the construction process is going very well indeed. We had intended to have secured bank debt for the development of Tavşan by this stage, but because the markets have been very tricky in Turkey, and we primarily wanted to fund through a Turkish bank, as we have done before, we've stepped back from that for the time being and see what the lay of the land is during early next year. In the meantime, we're continuing to finance the development of Tavşan completely internally through the funding capacity of Zenit Madencilik. Tavşan, we're aiming to produce 30,000 ounces of gold per annum, and now very much aiming for an 8-year mine life with the expansion of the resource I've mentioned. We have recently, in the last couple of weeks, commenced another drilling program, which will run into next year, which is continuing to test out for resource extensions along those areas previously defined. Much of the resource is essentially open in a number of directions, and we'll continue to grow that in due course. This graph just shows the production of Kızıltepe in blue. You can see the effect of the mill expansion kicking in here. So we've got a few more years left of Kızıltepe before that starts to run down, unless there's a further increase in reserves as a result of recent drilling. Tavşan, we're expecting to kick in the latter part of next year, and then continue to build that over the course of the following 7 or 8 years. And conceptually, we've got room in here for the development of Salınbaş and getting that into production as well. So moving on to Salınbaş, this obviously the largest deposit and project in the stable. This was a discovery made by our team originally in joint venture with European Goldfields and latterly Eldorado Gold before we acquired their 50% stake back from Eldorado in 2016. The discovery, I should say, was just made up on the top of this hill here of Salınbaş itself. The porphyry down here was well known from the 90s, but this main zone of mineralization at Salınbaş was a new discovery. I just pointed out here. So there's slightly different perspective between these two images, but they serve the point. So this is the discovery outcrop of Salınbaş, and then beneath the surface, you can see the outline of the Salınbaş ore body across a couple of different segments. And then out here is the core of the Ardler copper, gold, molybdenum, porphyry, which was the original focus, I suppose, for prior exploration. One thing that this image does not show is the potential for resources and mineralization in this region. And we've now built up an understanding that there is continuity between what is truly porphyry mineralization and what becomes the Sullenbush gold silver zone. So that's an area of active interest and indeed drilling at this point in time to properly understand how these two systems are related and ultimately what that means in terms of potential for further resource growth. The resource itself currently sitting at about 1.5 million ounces of gold across measured, indicated and inferred JORC categories. We have an active drilling program at Sullenbush since last year. That's continuing and will continue certainly through next year and quite possibly beyond. We have $8 million committed by Zoltan Holding to the further exploration and development of this particular asset. And it requires a lot of further drilling work so we can continue to build confidence in the resource and to properly explore the rest of the area. It's a highly prospective region in which the discovery of Hotmaden was made some years ago. And that sits just to the south of our project licenses. So there's every reason to continue a lot of high quality exploration across this project. We are also focusing on Eastern Turkey more generally. So just point out the location of Sullenbush here and Hotmaden. So this itself is a very prospective region, but we're particularly interested in what else Eastern Europe has to offer. It's a highly underexplored region. Relatively little work has been done over the years in this part of the country. The standout discoveries in the last 20 years, Çöpler, which is Turkey's second largest gold mine, gold deposit, and the Molokara discovery, which was made by Newmont, sitting at around 3 million ounces over here. But there, you can see these metallogenic belts arc into Iran and Armenia, and indeed into part of Iraq, and they're highly prospective. Certainly, as you can see over the border into Iran and Armenia, you know, there's every reason to believe that there's a lot for further scope through this region. And we have the advantage of full access to the Newmont database for Turkey, and we're certainly drawing on that in our further exploration of this region. So quickly on to Cyprus. I should point out that Peter is in the crowd there. Peter, give everyone a wave. So if you've got any questions about Venus Minerals and what Venus is up to, I won't steal Peter's thunder. He can wax lyrical about this one, but we're very excited about the prospects of Venus. We have, as I've mentioned, the Magellan project that's held 100% by Venus Minerals. That's sitting at 17 million tons at up to about 1% copper. There is also associated gold that we're getting to understand better in parts of this system, and this is the result of some of the recent drilling that's been undertaken by Venus, demonstrating that these very much are copper gold systems. There are other elements associated with these deposits, zinc in part, but to a lesser degree, and silver. So those are all ultimately going to contribute to the potential economics of Magellan. Separate to that, Peter and team have been working hard to secure the Apliki project over the last year. So we have an option for a 50-50 joint venture with the Yakovu Group, which is the largest construction company in Cyprus. Yakovu ultimately owns the SXEW processing facility, which was previously operational at Skouria Tisa until 2019. This is the electro-wind part of the circuit as it was operational back then, producing very high purity, almost completely pure copper cathode, which is highly sought by the market. I'll leave it at that for Venus. As I said, Peter can provide further detail. Likewise with Western Tethyan Resources, Mentor Demi is in the crowd. Mentor, if you raise your hand, there he is, halfway up a mountain, if not on top of the mountain, there in Kosovo. So this Western Tethyan Resources is currently 75% held by Ariana, the rest held by Mentor and the remaining specialist board that he's put together. We have now had the benefit of completing a deal with Newmont. And as I mentioned, Newmont injected $2.5 million US dollars into Ariana. They've also provided access to their databases for Eastern Europe that we now jointly own with Newmont, and utilizing the skill sets that Mentor and team have built up in the region and the experience that they've got, plus the benefit of Newmont, their team, their expertise, and now their financial capacity. We're going on to do great things in the region. Western Tethyan have got 300 kilometers squared of granted licenses in Kosovo currently, with a number of other areas under application. And I know Mentor's got his eyes on a number of other very interesting projects in the rest of the region among those countries. Lastly, Asgard Metals over here in Australia. This was originally set up to explore for lithium in the Pilbara region in 2014-15. We were very successful in the development of that strategy, and ultimately spawned two companies, Kingston Resources, that's still going, and a precursor company to Exor Resources, which itself has now been bought out by Perseus Mining. So Asgard did very well out of the development of that strategy, but it's broadened its horizons further now, and we're looking at not lithium necessarily, but big picture projects, potentially anywhere within the Eastern Hemisphere. We're trying to identify high quality teams with high quality assets that are really at the cusp of discovery. So that on that Lassonde growth curve, value curve that's commonly shown, it's just at that sort of inflection point before discovery. That's where we're sort of focusing our efforts to identify companies and projects in that space. These are our current investments: Panther Metals in Western Australia and the Northern Territory, Palace Resources in Kazakhstan, and Anamite Resources in Laos. Just very quickly, as a case study of an Asgard investment, Panther Metals only listed just shy of a year ago on the ASX. 5 million Australian dollar fundraise was completed. We participated in the IPO funding. We currently own 3.2% of the business, following direct investment plus a consultancy valued at $250,000. So our team is actively involved in the development of their exploration programs and their execution interpretation. And Panther's gone on to make a major discovery near Laverton in the Eastern Goldfields province of Western Australia, and established a very substantial JORC inferred resource of over 70 million tonnes at 0.7% nickel plus cobalt. So it's a very substantial deposit shown in plan here. And there are a number of other areas that are worth testing to expand the resource further still. There seems to be scope to take this to 100 million tonnes plus. And bearing in mind that this asset is located about 70 kilometres down the road from the active Murrin operation owned by Glencore, there's certainly a synergy associated with that potentially down the line. But we're talking about significant value here into the multi-billion-dollar range. So there was very much a real success story for Asgard and obviously for Panther themselves. So in summary, how are we doing for time? Yeah, good. So just to recap, our operations are continuing to perform exceptionally well in Turkey. Most importantly, we're achieving that through a low-cost base, which is being maintained. We're expecting the same to be replicated at Tavşan going forward. So hopefully in the latter part of next year, we'll be in a position to see the first production coming out of that project. We're continuing to focus on Turkey. We can see plenty of potential in the country. There are nuances to doing business in Turkey, and it's not as easy as perhaps it was in prior years, but we've got a way of doing things. We've got the team to do it, and we've got all the experience to bring to bear. So we have all the leverage we need to continue to perform very well in the country. And most importantly, our team and the Zenit team are continuing to focus all their attention on the current drilling programs that are operating across all the advanced projects. So we're really bringing that experience and the capacity of those teams to bear on all projects at the present time. As a result of those successful operations, we've demonstrated consistent profitability as a business since 2016. So we are organically self-funding now, resulting in a very strong financial position and no debt at the Ariana level, apart from a small bit of debt associated with the joint venture in Turkey, which I mentioned earlier, will be paid off quick smart. So there is planning in place for the payment of a long-term dividend stream. So we hope to provide further information on that in the year ahead. And importantly, we've also been able to spread our wings somewhat out of our traditional stomping ground of Turkey, and again bring all of our expertise developed over the last 20 years and bring that expertise to bear on other regions in Eastern Europe in particular, but also further afield. And importantly, ensuring that all that downside risk associated with any exploration venture is ultimately backstopped by the operational cash flow. That's a very important point, with the upside retained to the exploration success. And then it's also important, I think, to just point out that we have always tried to measure ourselves in some capacity, measure our performance as a business relative to our peer group, be it through share price performance or be it through some of those other metrics that I was talking about earlier. And some of the metrics do ultimately relate to environmental performance. So that's something that we're continuing to monitor. And ultimately what that means for the communities and broader environment within which we operate, and trying to ensure that we have community buy-in. And community buy-in ultimately is linked inextricably with the environmental side of our business. That obviously there are all sorts of sensitivities associated with the environment. We need to do our best to ensure that any risks associated with our exploration or other operations are mitigated in appropriate ways, so that we can ensure that the communities that we work with fully buy into our programs. And we've very much done that successfully in the case of Kızıltepe, now at Tavşan as well. So we're very pleased that we've been able to do that over very many years, and it's an absolutely critical part of our business and something that often doesn't get a huge amount of emphasis, but it's actually the make or break issue for mining companies. If you lose confidence as a result of environmental mismanagement, if you lose the confidence of the communities, then it doesn't matter how good your project is. It doesn't matter if it's 10 million ounces, it's never going to fly. So it's absolutely critical. It's the key risk. So we put a lot of emphasis into that. And I think that aspect really needs to be underscored at all stages of our business, be it at the exploration stage or at the production stage. So thank you very much. Hope that's helped answer any questions that you might have, and if you have any others, I'd be pleased to sort of stay online and run through some answers for you.